Let's talk about geopolitical foreign affairs. We have Sir Owen joining us. How are you, sir?
Wonderful, David. It's good to be with you again. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, I wanted to hit some of the stories in the news and the foreign policy framework that we focus in on. We had Colonel Douglas Macgregor on last week, and he had a piece out in the American Conservative called War and Regrets in Ukraine. Washington may regret its role in the war in Ukraine. And he goes into some of the background of our escapades around the world. He says, given the American politicians are always more preoccupied by domestic affairs than foreign policy, members of Congress are quick to adopt the true faith. This faith explains why for the last 8 years members thought a future war with Russia was a low-risk affair. Ukrainians would provide the cannon fodder, and Washington would provide the expensive weaponry and munitions. Predictably, Washington's governing strategic principles are unchanged from previous U.S. interventions around the world, muddle through masses of soldiers, in this case Ukrainian advised by U.S. and allied officers, and huge infusions of cash, equipment, and technology can and will permanently alter strategic reality in America's favor. The stupefying air of self-righteousness the Biden administration assumes when it attacks erstwhile strategic partners such as Saudi Arabia or delivers moralizing lectures to Beijing's leadership, or when its media surrogates express contempt for the Russian state is downright dangerous. Did you look at this piece? Any thoughts on some of the ideas in this?
Well, I did, and I think that McGregor is one of the true patriots that we're hearing from, and certainly an amazingly qualified, uniquely qualified individual to comment. And the message he is putting out is absolutely critical to understanding this thing. I mean, so far, the United States or Washington, let's say now, I always say Washington because I had nothing to do with it, neither did you, but Washington has authorized over $67 billion to spend on this Ukrainian war, where I doubt that many of our listeners care about or could put a finger on a map to locate. To put that in perspective, $67 billion is more than Russia's entire military budget for 2021. But this is just so far. Washington has authorized over $67 billion. And on top of that, there is virtually no oversight for these billions of dollars that have been sent to Ukraine. And Ukraine, before all this and they became heroes, was consistently the most corrupt, by international ratings, the most corrupt nation in Europe. So this aid not only, by the way, is not only going to direct funding for weaponry, it's also funding the operation of the Ukrainian government. Now that, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, it is almost beyond reason to think of such a thing. But what really concerns me at the end of the day is that the current strategy in Washington could start a nuclear war with Russia. And I think that that's what we all need to focus on. And I'm not sure that the man on the street in America yet, or even in the European capitals, but although I think they are probably more sensitive now with the energy crisis and all these things to the downside of this war. But it is absolutely, it's obvious that we are moving towards a situation here because of our policy. And why do I say that? Well, any foreign conflict in which Washington is a party, the Pentagon and the White House would, I think, routinely do two things. Number one is set objectives that clearly benefit the American people. And number two is set objectives that have a reasonable chance of success. Well, you listeners and every American should be shocked to learn that Washington's current war strategy, it doesn't do either one. So in an impromptu visit to Izium last month, the Ukrainian troops had retaken the population center as part of a Kharkiv offensive. Zelensky said that his troops were marching towards victory and that the Ukrainian flag that once again flew in Izium would soon be flying in every, now I'm reading a quote here, in every Ukrainian city and village. Well, 2 days later, Biden chimes in and seems to agree with that objective. And he told 60 Minutes, and I watch that the winning of a war in Ukraine is to get Russia out of Ukraine completely and recognizing that Ukrainian sovereignty. Well, this past Monday, apparently responding to this massive enhanced wave of missiles blasting the infrastructure of Ukrainian cities as a result of the bombing of a bridge, a Kerch bridge, Biden said that these attacks would only further reinforce our commitment to stand with the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes. Well, this is a very dangerous Ukraine strategy. It seems that this, as long as it takes, Val, to me, means that the United States will support Ukraine until Ukraine has victory, whatever that means, I suppose, apparently being defined as driving Russia out of all territory. And herein lies, back to my original comments, America's fundamental strategic problem, and it is a problem. CIA Director William Burns in May said that he thought that Putin was in a frame of mind which he doesn't believe he can afford to lose. And the chairman of a British Parliament, the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, this last month just said that Putin is now in a corner. This is arguably where he's the most dangerous. So pushing into the corner a man with the sole launch authority for a country that possesses the largest nuclear warhead arsenal. Russia possesses the largest nuclear warhead arsenal on the planet, I think is unwise, to say the least. Anyway, this, though, David, seems to be lost on some of the highest officials and retired generals and talking heads in the West. I mean, somehow this fundamental truth seems to be lost on them. In conjunction with his announcement that Russia would unilaterally annex portions of eastern Ukraine, Putin declared he would not hesitate to use nuclear weapons if he believed Russian territory was threatened. So, of course, the screaming and hollering, and rightfully so, and the clamor from Washington, the Washington-led West was immediate, but it wasn't well thought out, I don't believe. The reason I say this, former General, David Petraeus, he was a CIA director and he was a general. He said that he chimes in. He says that the U.S.-led NATO effort should take out every Russian conventional force, and I'm reading a quote here, that we can see and identify on the battlefield in Ukraine and also in Crimea and every ship in the Black Sea. Well, these are very influential people who have the ear of, in many instances, extraordinarily naive political representatives in Washington. And also, of course, and that really is what matters here, the people who make these decisions to do whatever it is that Washington is going to do, those are the people that matter in these sort of conflicts, because you and I don't have very much to do with it. Then you hear the EU policy chief, Joseph Borrell. He warned that if Russia ever used a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, the collective West would respond with a powerful answer. And let's see, what did he say? He said with conventional weapons, such that the Russian army will be annihilated. Well, so when you listen to all this, I mean, these are people that should know better, but are being very, very outspoken. One could say it might be just simple propaganda and the fog of battle and the propaganda wars. But if this really represents the thinking of those people who have the ear of the direct policymakers in the military. This is it should be of great concern to everybody out here listening to this program. I mean, we really, you have to appreciate the prevalent groupthink surrounding this Washington-led Western threat to the Putin government. I mean, Ben Hodges, he is the former commander of U.S. Army Europe, said that the West should help Ukraine defeat all the Russian troops on Ukrainian territory, including Crimea. And he says the goal, of course, is the total restoration of Ukrainian sovereignty. That's a quote, too. Said, but there is a disquieting disconnect, David, between the strategic objectives of the United States in pursuing and recognition of what this winning might produce. I mean, if Washington's enemy of the day, and we have many, in the last few years, we have just been one more after the other, says, if our enemy were the equivalent, say, to Vietnam or the Taliban or Iraq or ISIS or Gaddafi's Libya or Syria or Somalia is what they call them, the al-Shabaab terrorists, well, then Washington, this Washington-led West, they could pursue any military objective of choice. They could, heedless of the wisdom or rightness or morality of such actions, and there would be nothing that these hapless nations and actors they could do to prevent such a campaign.
Right.
But but now we know with it.
We got Drudge Report highlighting a story from the Mirror, which is a sensationalist, hawkish magazine, but it says Vladimir Putin tried to detonate nuke, but his plans were sabotaged, insider claims. They love to sensationalize this whole deal. We got another story in AP News, which is about as credible as the Sun, probably less. They say U.S. claims that Iranian troops in Crimea backing Russian drone strikes. Seems to be a Russian drone war going on between Ukrainian and Russian drones. And now Tehran is supposedly sending in Iranian soldiers. What does that do, if anything, in terms of the changing the game at all?
Well, I just think that all of, the comments you just read, I mean, it's just static. It's just the fog of battle. I don't see it changing anything. Really, Iran is I doubt that there are Iranian soldiers. I have no idea. I won't even speculate on it, but I have just come to the point, and I think that the public should come to the point of understanding that you're getting nothing but 100% propaganda. When everybody is singing the same song, you have to understand that you're getting propaganda, and that's what we're getting in the United States. And it's unfortunate. But again, as I was saying, if the enemy of the day were, Syria or Vietnam, I mean, you could do to them as you like, but you can't do that when you are dealing with a nuclear power. We have never in your or my lifetime, David, engaged a peer power. And now it looks like that Biden and Washington is trying to edge up on. It's a very strange situation. Here we are. We're funding their war. We're providing them with the weaponry, and we say we're not at war with them. We're not at war with Russia. We're directly responsible for the death of Russian soldiers. We're providing intelligence. We're providing munitions. We're literally providing intel. We're providing training for their troops in foreign countries, and I mean, this is truly a hybrid war. I don't think in my life I've seen anything quite as like this, really.
Right.
So, what too many of our current leaders and the fervent Washington, the hawks and the neocons and the citizens, the armchair warriors, seemingly fail to grasp is that unlike all our military opponents of the past several decades, Russia's possession of these sophisticated nuclear weapons and delivery systems mean that they can in a moment of extreme anxiety or fear or whatever, or nihilism, initiate a nuclear war that would quite literally obliterate the United States. That is, wipe us out as a functional existence. I mean, some people may crawl out from under a rock, badly seared, but the United States would be wiped out of its functional existence. And everybody says, well, they'd be wiped out too. Well, I don't particularly care about that. I don't want to be wiped out. You shouldn't want to be either. I mean, your family and your friends and your life as you know it, completely obliterated. That is the reality of this situation, and somehow it seems to be slipping between the cracks. It shouldn't really be hard to understand. If Washington and NATO, they finally provide enough firepower, intelligence, training to Ukrainian troops that will enable them somehow to physically drive the Russian forces completely out of all Ukrainian territory, especially the historic and really emotionally charged in the strategic areas of, say, the Donbass and Crimea. Well, Putin will be herded and forced into a corner where he has to choose between allowing his entire force to be completely defeated or escalate to the use of I'm afraid, of nuclear weapons. So, I mean, it should be obvious. And I personally believe that there is nothing in this conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, and I think any reasonable human being would agree with me that that is worth the loss of one NATO or American city to a nuclear blast, period. There's nothing in this conflict between Russia and Ukraine that is worth any of our NATO allies or an American city to be obliterated in a nuclear blast. And as you know, David, here in Florida, we live, near that MacDill Air Force Base that is the home of Central Command and Joint Special Operations Command and God knows what else. And so we have a chip in the game. I mean, we are really ground zero if something like this were to lift off. But right. That's my rant about this. And so I think it's clear that no one's taking the nuclear thing seriously. They don't think it's going to happen. They think it's a Chicken Little kind of thing. They've heard it so many times, and they think it's like a cartoon. They don't think it's real. And I don't know. I think it's very real. There's a lot of people that never thought. Well, it is. I believe it is real. Very good. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, David.